Hello, today we are presenting QuaLIS based clinical trial management system. Before that, we would like to talk about the features of QuaLIS. QuaLIS is a 100% web-based platform and it works on Linux, Windows, any of the platforms. At the same time, if we look at the database supports, it works on SQL Server, Oracle, MySQL or any Postgres free-based databases. As a client, it would use Internet Explorer, Firefox or any other popular browser. It is tested on most of the available browsers today. Let us talk about clinical management system. As a standard practice and workflows required in the clinical trial management, we have a volunteer bank where we store all the records of volunteers. We have pharmacy and stock management where we are managing the pharmacy products received for the clinical trials and any other stock related to the study, and the laboratory management process is managed with the expiry dates and all the necessary alerts to ensure the usage of the pharmacy products and the laboratory stocks in a proper manner. As we move forward in the clinical management system, the first and the foremost thing would be about managing the users and the roles and rights within the application. QuaLIS allows defined definition of roles and rights based on the user requirements. The administrator user can define them as required, and then the screen and control can be managed based on the needs of the end user. The users in the system can be controlled basis activation, deactivation. The users which are no longer required can be retired. Retired users are permanently disabled from the system usage. The password policy allows definition of 21 CFR Part 11 compliant features so that you can have an encrypted password, and various password policies like minimum length, maximum length of the characters, this use of special characters, all such features are provided in QuaLIS. Let's have a look at the system here. We'll talk about few of the highlights within the system. If we look at the volunteer management system, you have the list of volunteers which could be part of the forthcoming studies. We have a multi-user multi-value filter here which allows filtration of the volunteers based on the study nature. Let's say for example the age between 20 and 30, if that is the requirement of the study, and male or female, married, unmarried, alcoholic, smoker, all that can be defined before we filter and look for the proper volunteers to conduct our studies. Volunteers also can be validated with the fingerprint. So we have biometric scanner facility available wherein we can store volunteers' fingerprints, thumb impressions and index impressions, and the same can be validated throughout the life cycle of the clinical management studies. We can also manage the volunteer images. We can store the images, capture and store the images in a version control. Let's say the user appears after 10 years and you would like to compare the face before 10 years and the current face. We can have facility to capture the latest photograph and store the old photograph as well in the version controlled manner. Once we have the volunteers, we can start with the screening process. We can define various screening checklists like general examination, history of illness, various laboratory tests to be conducted on the volunteer, And then once we have the checklist ready, we can go ahead and start with the screening transactions, wherein we start adding volunteers. Here we can either scan the thumb impression, like right thumb impression, left thumb impression, and identify the volunteer, or also we can use the identification number of the volunteer so that we can fetch the required volunteer, which was predefined or pre-filtered based on our requirements. Once we have the volunteer selected for the screening process, we start collecting the information about the volunteer and start analyzing the health aspects. So here we can see we have screen where we are collecting the medical history of the volunteer, where we can check whether the volunteer has gone through any previous surgeries, recent hospitalization within 3 months. All such questions can be predefined into the checklist, can be used along with the screening process. And once we complete with the screening process, our volunteer is ready for the next phase. Thereafter, we can start defining the protocol of our study, wherein we associate the product associated, and we can store the product under pharmacy management. We can define the storage conditions for the same, and then the chamber allocation. And once we are through with that, we can go back and start with the protocol management studies. Here we can associate multiple documents associated with the protocol studies, and we can start defining the protocol requirements. For example, here we have dosage requirement, how many dosages we are planning and at what time. Based on the number of volunteers, the first time point will be added up for the predefined frequencies. Similarly, we can define catering, phlebotomy, vital signs, and post-study. Once we have all the information collected, we can start with the study, wherein we can see these volunteers are displayed for each of the types based on the selections in the protocol study, and we can generate the study requirement formats and start collecting the information for the same. Here we can select the protocol we selected and start collecting the information. Once we start collecting the information, the timestamps are captured in the system. If there is a deviation between the timestamp predefined and the time at which the information is collected, the system will prompt for the reason, and the user entering the information has to give the reason for the delays. Once we capture the information for all the elements, we complete the study, and if the volunteer is fit, then we define him as a fit volunteer for the next processes. We have plenty of other features which can be discussed about it, so please do contact us for the same, and we can talk more about the features of clinical trial management system. Thank you.